It's your weekly breakaway for fun conversations on pro cycling and so much more. Join us as we go beyond the slipstream. I'm Matt Harper, and together with my brother Justin, we'll do deep-ish dives on bike races, movies, bands, and all manner of shiny pop cultural objects. Oh, and did I mention bike races? We're kind of obsessed. Allez!
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Slipstream. I'm Justin and this is my brother Matt. And today in our first segment, we've got more French and Spanish cycling to get into with a recap of the Tour of Provence and the Clasica Almeria. Next, we're going to assess Tour de France winner Geraint Thomas's other profession, podcaster. Hint, he's pretty good at that too. And in segment 3, in honor of Valentine's Day, we're going to have a fun but tender discussion of the movie Rom-Coms that are closest to our hearts. And as always, we'll finish out with more adventures in the Broom Wagon. Allez! Please note, this segment contains spoilers. If you have not seen these races and wish to remain unspoiled, please jump ahead to segment 2. Racing in the Tour of Provence and the Clasica Almeria wrapped up today in France and Spain with a strong defense of his 2024 Provence title by Little Trek's Mads Pedersen, and the biggest win of his career for Milan Frenton of Cofidis in Almeria. Matt, are you emotionally scarred from watching the head-on shot of the finish of Stage 3 of the Tour of Provence?
How could I not be? That was freaking brutal. I don't know who the Bahrain rider was. I think it was maybe Fred Wright. That was like the third guy to come down. So basically what happened was Pascal Ackermann was sprinting for the win. He was like maybe third position at that point, but nobody in front of him. He had the other guys kind of laterally to the side of him. But you know, he's putting a whole lot of watts through those pedals at that moment with like 50 meters to go in the race, and his chain skips. So it's not nobody's fault, thankfully. I mean, you know, if you can say thankfully about a crash this nasty, but there's nobody at fault. It's just that his chain skip. These things happen, but it was the worst possible moment. He goes face first over the bars, and then the Cofidis rider that was right behind him like lands on top of him, and they kind of do a roll. He ends up feet first, face down, sliding along the pavement for quite a ways. But just behind them, a Bahrain guy went down. I believe it might have been Fred Wright. And he falls pretty hard, and he rolls. Yeah, and when he rolls over, his face is like right on the pavement, like getting smashed in there. At least the two angles that we saw, it looks so unpleasant. Now you see him at the end, he kind of rolls over and his face is not like covered in blood or anything, but that was literally like 1 second after it happened. So like blood might have not even come up yet or whatever. It looks so bad. And then
he also once he was over on the wall, he got hit by another Cofidis rider that was coming up from behind. I mean, it was. Yeah,
I think that guy was managed to slow down enough. It looked like he was really pulling back when he made contact with him. But my God, like, that was so nasty. So yes, I'm pretty scarred by that. But you know, good. Well, we can start there. 3-day stage race, Tour of Provence. And last year's winner, Mads Pedersen, put up a pretty damn good defense of his title and taking the GC in this race. And I think it's cool how there are certain stage races out there just due to the nature of how many stages they are and what the parkour is or whatever, that like a guy who's essentially a sprinter. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, Mads Pedersen is a climby sprinter, but a sprinter nonetheless, like that he can take a GC, and that's just kind of cool.
Yeah. I really liked the end of yesterday's stage. I'm a huge Matty Mahork fan, and I was really rooting for him to pull out the victory, but it seemed like in the end that Mads was just too strong for him.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of a foregone conclusion. He really didn't have a lot of options going into the finish of that thing. But I'll tell you what, it was. I love a finish like that where you got a couple of guys dangling off the front. You got a few more guys right behind them nipping at their heels. It's like anything can. I mean, over the course of the last like 50 Ks of that race, it was just a ever evolving group of like 30 riders that were breaking off into little groups here and there, and 2 would split off, 3 would split off, and things would come back together. And then ultimately towards the end there, Mohoric and Pedersen were able to get away. Did you catch, like, with like 2Ks to go, they came around a left-hand turn and like some dude's like walking across the street with groceries in his hand?
Yeah.
They were like 2 feet away from him. Like, that could have been disaster. And coming on the heels of that crap with a Toile de Bessèges last week, like that would not have been pretty.
No, not at all.
But yeah, but that was it was a cool stage. And when it came down to it, it was sort of a foregone conclusion. It was just because because Pedersen can climb. There just wasn't enough like elevation gain anywhere in that last bit that Mohoric could have hoped to put.
And he doesn't have as strong a sprint as Pedersen does. So I mean, in the end, when you put him up head to head, with 100 meters to go, I mean, Mads is just going to pull away every time.
And it's funny too because like in many like in many other races that have that kind of a finish where it's just a handful of guys at the end all kind of scrapping it out, Matty Marge is usually the guy to beat. You know what I mean? Because right. he does have a good sprint for his kind of rider. It's just that Pedersen is kind of his kind of rider as well, but leaning way more to the sprinty side of it. And he just didn't really have much in the way of options. And so he clung to the wheel. Of course, I mean, you're never going to see Mohoric make a tactical mistake.
No.
And so his best bet was just let Pedersen lead the entire way, hang on the wheel, and see if some magic can happen there. But wise as well, though, because I think he got himself like in a third on the GC by doing that, right?
Yep.
So that's good.
Two solid, sprint wins for Sam Bennett.
Yeah, and I like seeing him get wins. I don't know. I was not like a giant fan of him when he was back on he was on Red Bull, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Or well, I guess back then it was Bora. There was no Red Bull when he was there. And he was very dominant. Like it's so interesting how like in the world of sprinting, it just seems like, your Mark Cavendishes aside, it seems like in the last 8, 9, 10 years that a guy comes on and he's like the guy for like a year, maybe 2. Then the next guy is like the guy for a year, maybe 2. So, I mean, I feel like that's exactly what happened with both Sam Bennett and Caleb Ewan. Or like Caleb was the guy to beat for a while. And then like Sam Bennett was a guy. He had like a super convincing green jersey win, Tour de France, in 2000 or something like that. I will definitely never forget that side camera shot of Bennett winning that. The Tour de France last year aside, the Tour de France has always got that incredible finish where they've got that mounted camera that goes like right beside the leaders. And in that one where he won, he was already in the green. So it was like entire green helmet, jersey, all kit, shoes, bike, everything green. And that camera was just like locked on him from beside. It follows him all the way through the finish, the arms up in the air, literally coming to a stop. It's still right there next to him, and he stops and he picks the green bike up and just like holds it over his head. Perfect camera shot. It's like one of the great shots of all time. I
need to go watch that.
But he was so dominant. So it was like, I feel the way about him. I felt the way about him that I kind of feel about Philipsen right now.
Okay, yeah. But look at how Philipsen was a disaster, 3 years ago or whatever, and then
Right.
he came in and just completely dominated. So,
I would not be surprised if like Phillipsen is like done this year. Like it's like, so all right, we had our little Phillipsen era. Who's the next guy? It just seems like, and then like 2 years from now, like Phillipsen, exactly, and then like 2 years from now, Phillipsen has like a little hot streak, and I'm like, man, I'm so happy to see Jasper Phillipsen win because he hasn't. It's like, during the time, I'm like, fuck that guy. I want somebody else.
I am super interested, obviously, to see what Olaf Koy does. I know that he had some success in the Tour of Oman, so.
He's running good this year, and speaking of him, we can use that to transition to Almeria if you like, because he was the defending champion, but he did not come back to race this year. What do we have in Almeria? Who won?
So Milan Frentin won on a sprint
Of Cofidis.
Yeah, Cofidis. I thought it was going to be Cantor from Astana because they literally look strong in the lead up right to the end there. But Milan was able to hold those guys off in sprint. Is this his first win? I don't really know much about him.
No, he won a stage in Dunkirk, and then I never even heard of this one, the Tour of Poitou. Both of those were last season. He's 23 years old. I guess he won the SD Works BW Classic in 2023. But otherwise, it's seconds, thirds, and fourths, and some minor races. So this is 100% the biggest win of his career.
Chapo for him.
Yeah. That's exciting.
Arnaud Delis didn't really do much. Got kind of pushed out at the end.
I think he swung too wide. I didn't really notice it as like movement from other riders as much as just sort of bad positioning on himself. That was strange.
Yeah,
he was not taking the shortest distance between 2 points on that curve.
No, not at all. It was a lot going on in the end too. The multiple roundabouts and turns and a U-turn, and there was a lot going on there at the end of that race to get yourself in position. That's why I thought Astana had it on lock when were up there at the end with 3 riders, but just couldn't really pull it out in the end.
Yeah, that chicane just had me feeling nervous. It's like they went through a roundabout, but then it bent like once or twice afterwards before they finally got into the finishing straight. And having just finished watching that crash at Provence, I was so nervous watching them when they're coming through that thing. I'm just like, oh God. I don't know, man. They go so fast. These guys are insane. Like maybe when I was 23, I would have been like, hell yeah. But like, I look at that, I'm like, there's no freaking way you would catch me in the middle of one of those things. Good Lord. It's frightening.
I thought the aerials and the view of the countryside really beautiful locale.
Well, and the end of the finishing town as well. I'm not sure what the finishing town was, but there was that Roman like Colosseum ruin that was absolutely stunning. And as they were showing those helicopter shots, I'm looking down and I see like a cool little town square, and there's like another little Roman era thing, and I'm like, I got to go there. That looks amazing. Like I want to go to that town or whatever. So
all the palm trees. It's just really stunning.
It was putting me in my memories for when I went to Croatia years and years ago. We went to a town called Pula, and it had a Roman Colosseum, like fully intact. It had a little square like I saw on that thing, and then it also had this really cool, just like a building that looked like the Parthenon, not the Parthenon. Sort of like that, but a classic Roman, like triangle roof, big columns in front building, but it was real small. It was maybe 100 feet long, right? and pristine, because like the Coliseum thing, that wasn't like, it was starting to crumble in places and stuff like that. But this other Roman building was like absolutely pristine. Anyways, beautiful part of the world. One day we will make our European cycling travels. It will happen. But we'll save that for another day.
Anything else on these? And otherwise we can wrap it up. We will have a lot more racing to talk about next week because we got the UAE tour coming up. So if you don't have anything else, we'll be right back. Geraint Thomas cemented his reputation as a true cycling legend with his masterful Tour de France win in 2018. The seeming crescendo in a storied career as one of the greats of British road cycling, and while he never won the Tour again, he did manage a podium visit in the Giro d'Italia in 23, and gave one of the most memorable lead-outs in recent years when he led out his old mate Mark Cavendish in the final stage of that very same race. But today we're not discussing Geraint Thomas, cyclist. We're turning our attention to his other big pursuit these days, podcasting. His two podcasts, What's Occurring and the Geraint Thomas Cycling Club, have become mainstays in the road cycling podcastosphere in recent years. Matt, which Geraint Thomas are you a bigger fan of, cyclist or podcaster?
That is a good question. Hard to say. I mean, I'm dead even because boy, do I love him as a cyclist, but his podcasts, both of them have been like really major influences for me in terms of my love of cycling in the past couple of years. And I think they kind of, in a way, they sort of caught him by surprise. I think they gained popularity sort of much more quickly than perhaps he had anticipated. But he's done a really great job of capitalizing on that success. I think that What's Occurring was the original podcast, and then he started the Geraint Thomas Cycling Club after What's Occurring had gotten pretty successful. And I sort of like the dynamic between the two of them, where What's Occurring is like his in-season sort of boots on the ground look at what it's like to be a rider. I should mention that he did that podcast with his buddy Luke Rowe, who was his former teammate. Luke retired at the end of last year. And then once the season finished, there was, I guess, a void. They were like, well, there's not really a whole lot to talk about right now, so let's do something else. And that's when he started the Geraint Thomas Cycling Club with Tom Fordyce, who's a terrific broadcaster, in my opinion. He that was created like a sort of a more sort of formalized show, and that was like a guest driven thing, and whereas the What's Occurring was a lot looser. So very cool couple of podcasts. I'm keen to see what happens with What's Occurring moving forward now that Luke is retired. I have not heard word one about that. Have you?
I have not. There's, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but there's just not much information out there outside of where you actually digest these podcasts on the podcast itself. I think the biggest thing is he's very charismatic. I mean, he's got a lot to say. He definitely has, his opinions, but he's so welcoming to anybody that he seems to talk to. He gets great guests. Like, his guests are just out of control sometimes. But it's a very easy podcast to listen to. It's very, I don't know, it's very comforting. And I know for me, as somebody that wasn't, that's been late, like, only got into cycling recently, it gives me a really good insight into the inner workings of cycling in a way that a lot of the other media that there is to digest doesn't get into. It really gives it a personal side. So for me, that's been a really neat juxtaposition, versus a lot of the other stuff that I take in as far as cycling is concerned.
Yeah, definitely. On the Watts occurring side, especially where it's just like him and Luke chopping it up literally hours after a race has ended. And, it's the really cool look like inside because, both of those guys are key parts of whatever team, they are, whatever race they're at. Yeah, so they're inside and they both know racing backwards and forwards. They came up through the junior ranks. So, they've got literally decades of experience between them in cycling. And as you said, Geraint is just got such a great personality. He's very charismatic. Part of what I really like about that show in particular, Watts occurring, but really both of them, is a lot of the sort of Anglo-isms, and it's very English. You know what I mean? Like they talk about weird English food and just some of the turns of phrases that they use.
They mention Cardiff a lot because they're from Wales.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure. Well, Geraint lives in Monaco or something like that, but I was doing a little research. He owns this place in Cardiff, or outside of Cardiff, that is like a wedding venue. It's like some badass old, like, historic mansion or something. He bought it, I assume, with his Tour de France winnings or whatever. That's where he got married. And then now it's like this absolutely like stunning wedding venue. If you go to their website, it's like gorgeous photography and stuff. And I'm like, all right, good on you, Geraint, with your sweet, like, little English villa. I love how like Watts occurring opens up with that like feed me till I want no more, feed me till I want no more. It's just stuff like that. It's so English. No American sporting podcast would ever start off with some like English choral song or whatever. But it's just classic.
Well, the other thing is too is that it's especially with Watts occurring, it's very low production quality, and I don't think the podcast suffers one bit from that. Like them recording on their phones or like with the little handheld, these like little tiny handheld mics, and it's just they make it very interesting because of them. Like they are very interesting, and Luke is very good too. Like. I think it'll be interesting to see, if Luke, Luke's been on Eurosport, a few times through other races last year because he wasn't able to race, and he did a great job on there. So, I wish him the best in whatever his next pursuit is. But if it's broadcasting, he's perfectly suited for it.
Absolutely. He's fantastic, and they're great together too. The fact that they've been friends for so long, they've just got a very sort of easy interplay between them. It's very comforting. I like that you use that word. It's a comforting sort of place to be. Just very familiar and warm, friendly, and informal, and it's just like such a nice check-in. And it's interesting.
Good word.
It's really interesting. Everybody in the world of cycling listens to that podcast because I hear that thing mentioned in races and blah, blah, like people like listen to other podcasts and people are constantly saying, well, Geraint Thomas was saying that blah, 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 or Geraint Thomas was talking to such and such person and he said such and such. So I think by virtue of the fact that, number one, he's got a stunning palmarès, comparatively speaking, he's certainly one of the 3 or 4 greatest, British cyclists of all time. Had Olympic gold medals on the track. He was a world champion 3 times on the track. And then, he's won just about every, week-long stage race, every important one, Tour de Suisse and, the Dauphiné and Paris-Nice. And, he's won all of those. He's won a one-day classic. So he's got a rock solid Palmares, and then he's got this just really sort of cheeky, kind of fun loving way about him. He seems like one of the lads. Like he's a guy who there's no doubt that man, like when he's got some time off, he's going down to the pub and getting some beers. Like that's a guy that you'd want to go have a beer with. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's just universally liked, and everybody in the Peloton's listening to his podcast. Every commentator is listening to it. So he's got a pretty big platform, which I think he uses to great success in a good way.
Well, I mean, the guests he pulls they're just ridiculous. I mean, in season, he gets the biggest names in cycling. He gets Tadej Pogacar. He gets, Remco Evenepoel, Demi Vollering. I mean, it's, the biggest names in the sport. He can get them. And when he gets them there, it's very like, it's not what you would expect from a podcast with these, huge names. They stay themselves. They stay being that kind of informal, off the cuff, thing, and really get to know the people as opposed to just asking the same, questions that everybody else would ask them. They ask them things that are much more interesting and give you a window inside of these people's lives that is more refreshing than just watching kind of a standard interview show. If you want to see a standard interview, they get interviewed all the time. But if you want to see something that's a little bit different or hear something that's a little bit different with these folks and get a different spin on their lives, this podcast is so good for that.
Yeah, you've put your finger on what is the big draw, I think, for the Geraint Thomas Cycling Club. So it's the Geraint Thomas Cycling Club podcast where they pull the guests, the more formalized one that he does alongside Tom Fordyce. And yeah, it's exactly that. He gets these guys on there and he's so chummy with them. They're just he's got an incredible way of like putting a guest at ease from the jump. It's just we're hanging out with the lads, and we're going inside baseball, and it's just like it's really nice. You're exactly right. The insight that you get that's not like what you're going to get from any formal interview is just beautiful on that show. And I got to give a shout to Tom Fordyce. That guy's an incredible broadcaster. I've listened to some other stuff that he's done. He did that Recycle podcast that I've mentioned to you many times. That's just like stories of cycling races of old. God, I wish they would put out more episodes of that. I could listen to one of those every week for the rest of my life. I give a big recommendation, and we'll stick a link in the show notes for both that podcast, and also he did another one with a woman. I can't remember her name, but it's called "We Didn't Start the Fire," and it literally takes the Billy Joel song "We Didn't Start the Fire," and it does a full episode about every single reference in that entire song. So it's, how he's like, John Lennon, Joko Bo, like every single reference, like whole episode, like, first they start with like line number one, and it's all, and they bring on a guest to talk about like an expert. What
a concept. But dude's a great, like he's got a great delivery too. Like I love listening to Tom. Like his accent is just smooth as butter.
Yeah, and he knows how to defer to Geraint for his expertise at the same time, sort of keeping the conversation like on track and keeping things moving. And he asks very thoughtful questions to the guests as well. He's not, a slouch in that regard. I mean, he is, that he's watching all the races and everything. He's intimately familiar with what's going on. So, I love his presence there, and I just think it's going to be interesting to see like. What happens with what's occurring, especially I know that GTCC is going to keep going. I would think. I mean, they're still putting out episodes right now, but like now is the time when what's occurring would be picking up. So it would probably be good to figure out if that's going to be happening some more. Maybe we should figure that out before our segment here. But like you said, there's just not a lot out there of people sort of discussing what. Anything about Geraint Thomas as a podcaster, even though he's got this massive presence in the cycling podcasting sphere, is the way I see it. So,
I think
strange, but
it'll be interesting to see how what happens to him after he transitions and, out of cycling, because this is likely going to be his last year. So, but look, man, he's got a built-in, next thing to do. So, even if he doesn't already have a plan to be a DS or do something else, he's got this. And I'm sure that it'll be wildly popular.
yeah. I really, really hope he continues. I know he did like a big live show with Luke Rowe in Cardiff, like a live broadcast of the podcast, and so they got a great thing, and yes, one would hope they will keep it going in some form or fashion, but it's going to be a fun ride. I would say my hot, not hot takes, but my prediction would be that Luke stays in the broadcasting sphere, and Geraint, I would imagine, I think he's going to become involved with British Cycling or Ineos in some form. He's going to stay involved with all that kind of stuff, but continue to podcast. So that'd be my prediction for what direction he's headed in.
I think those are two pretty solid predictions. So on that note, we'll wrap it up and we'll be right back. The rom-com is a staple genre in the world of cinema, and while there is a veritable mountain of disastrous attempts at this tricky form littering the landscape of movie history, the ones that are really good have a way of touching our hearts that is different from other genres, making us feel real joy and a happiness to be alive. Matt, let's compare our top 3 rom-coms, starting with your number 3.
All right. At my number 3, I am going with As Good as It Gets. I talked about this topic with my wife. I was just sort of like, hey, what would you say your 3 favorite rom-coms are of all time? And, we started talking about it. And as I knew she would, hers were like very conventional picks. I think like 10 Things I Hate About You and some very sort of like right down the middle rom-coms. And as I talked about mine with her, it became clear that mine are very sort of unconventional picks, I would say. But I'm sticking with them. So number 3, I've got As Good as It Gets. This is the one from, I want to say it's like mid 90s. Jack Nicholson, Helen Hunt, Greg Kinnear, and I think that maybe hasn't aged very well, but don't worry about that. We'll get to one that definitely hasn't aged. Maybe the movie, it hasn't aged very well. My number 1 is got there's definitely issues there, but I don't give a shit. But As Good as It Gets, the reason I like this was just for a couple of moments in that movie, and I guess we should say that like we're gonna spoil these movies. I mean, they're
100%.
They're old as hell, so I'm not really worried about it. But I mean, I thought Nicholson was a great character. He was so irascible and just a prick, and yet you found a way to kind of like the grumpy old jerks, somehow, some way. And they did a great job of sort of slowly revealing his humanity. Greg Kinnear sort of just, you had to admire his character as well. I mean, he went through a whole lot in that movie. He got his ass beat in the beginning and was willing to get vulnerable and throw himself at the Nicholson character and just force him to be a good guy, come hell or high water. He's like, right here, and you're gonna freaking take care of me. And but there's a couple of moments in that movie that absolutely just get me every single time. So I'm gonna point out 2 of them. One of them in the funny realm, and then one of them in the heartfelt realm. The heartfelt one, well, the funny one was when he went in to see his editor, and there's like a young intern in there or something, and she sees him and she knows who he is. He's this famous writer, And she comes up to him and she's like, Mr. Udall, you've been such an inspiration to me over the years. It's amazing to get to talk to you. And I just have to ask you, how do you write women so well? And he goes, I just think of a man and then take away reason and accountability. It's like so great.
And he delivers it in that great Jack Nicholson way of like just punching the punchline so well.
It's so funny. And then the other one is when Helen Hunt confronts him about like, what is your deal? Like, why are you so consumed with me? You come in here all the time and you're just a jerk to everybody in the world, but you seem so dedicated to me. And I don't get you. Like, what's your deal basically? And he goes into this elaborate explanation of how he, was doing, he's been doing these things recently that, he doesn't normally do. And, I find myself like, helping this guy out and doing this thing for this person and, et cetera, et cetera. And she's like, I don't get, what are you going for? Like, what are you telling me here? And he's like, you make me want to be a better man. And it's just like, oh, so for me,
I can't remember. Is she like a waitress in that movie?
Yeah. Okay. She's like the waitress, and she's got the son with like the kind of physical condition, and he's helping her out. He's giving her all this money and stuff, and she's like, she's just like, "Why are you doing this, man? Because you're such a dick every time you come in here, but you're doing this beautiful thing for us, and I don't understand it. What's the deal?" And he's like, you make me want to be a better man, and I just thought that was a beautiful sentiment. So number 3, as good as it gets. What you got? Number 3.
I'm going with. And this was tough. Because I'm like, there's a bunch of movies, but I kind of like what are the ones that really speak to me? But I went with Wedding Crashers.
Okay, I like that.
It's a little outside the box as far as that, but it's 100% a romantic comedy. But it's in this like the early 2000s vein of when these movies switched. Because as I was doing my research, I realized that like you keep the traditional ones pretty much like through time, but they definitely have like a peak versus when they were like the 90s seemed to be just like littered with them, and then they kind of taper off in the 2000s, and they really kind of center along actors at that point. Like this it actor is doing a lot of romantic comedies. Matthew McConaughey, Julia Roberts earlier, but
Sandler.
Yeah, Sandler. You get this moment where these little ones kind of pop through, and you, on face value, you're like, oh, it's a raunchy comedy. But when you really, analyze it and look at it as a whole, they really are romantic comedies. They're just a different version of the romantic comedy. And that movie is a movie that I've quoted for years. I still quote it, on the regular. And I think I have a little special place in for that movie because it's set in DC. It's in DC and Maryland, and Christopher Walken's in it, and it's wild, it's zany, but it's also super heartfelt, and like you totally kind of understand how, Owen Wilson is this guy that's been very cavalier with women and feelings and all of these things throughout his young life. And then he finally like meets this person that he connects with, and it completely changes for him. And it's so neat to kind of watch him transition from the Lothario to the sweet guy that is trying to like figure out how to get out of his lie and be able to fall in love with this girl. And I just love the story and the juxtaposition of the other love story that's going on between Vince Vaughn and Isla Fisher that is completely zany and way off the rails. And like you have that scene where she ties him up in the bed, and then the brother comes in, and Christopher Walken comes in, and it's just, I just absolutely love it. It's just such a good feel-good movie. There's just so many parts in it where it's just like it never misses a beat.
Yeah, that's a great one. The two things I'll say about that quickly is one, I like the setup for that movie, like the idea of these guys who are like love to crash weddings and stuff. It's a great like sort of convention to build structure the film around. It just sets up a lot of great possibilities. And then the other thing is that like the comedic highs of that movie are very high. Like that is a scream with laughter movie at the funny parts. Like Ilya Fisher, uh, she like steals that movie. I mean, she is so goddamn funny in that movie.
There's
So unhinged.
so many people. Bradley Cooper's in that movie and steals every scene that he's in. Like he's so good as the bad guy in the movie, and yet you're
That's
just go.
Go ahead.
But he's such a good bad guy in the movie, but he's also kind of like has this charming side to him where you kind of can't take your eyes off of him.
Perfect transition into my number two, which is
Go.
Silver Linings Playbook. I just watched this movie like a week and a half ago. Perfect timing because it's all about the Philadelphia Eagles in that movie, and they won the Super Bowl. Brutal Super Bowl. But Bradley Cooper, once again, got to give the guy credit. Like he plays a guy that is hard to like. He's freaking annoying in that movie, big time annoying. But you just know from the jump that there is something buried down deep inside of him that's good, and he sells it. I always give a lot of props to an actor who is willing to take roles where they don't look like when they don't look good, when they're the dick. It's one thing to take a villain role that's a juicy villain role, but to take a role where you're just like a dick, that's a whole different thing. Or just an unlikable, annoying person. And that's what he is in that movie. But man, does that thing pay you off at the end? Like it's so gratifying at the end. What happens? Jennifer Lawrence is fantastic in that movie. The way she is just like such a ball breaking, like hold her own. I'm not taking shit off you. Like I've been hurt and I'm done being hurt kind of thing. Like she's fantastic. And I watched it when it first came out and I remembered like, I know I loved this movie, but I'm having a hard time remembering. And I watched it again. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. This thing is awesome. So Silver Linings Playbook, my number two. You seen it?
I have. It's been a while. I'll probably go back and watch it again since you're speaking so good of it. But I definitely remember Bradley Cooper being really good in it. I mean, there's not
great
much.
De Niro performance in there too. Like as the Eagles obsessed dad, and like they're totally believable. Like their whole family dynamic and like all the characters and everything is like super believable. Like they do a great job of like just giving you this like blue collar Philadelphia families. What do you got number two?
I went with Moonstruck, and I went back and actually watched this week, and really great movie, man. It's got a great cast. Cher's in it. Nick
It's been
Cage.
forever since I've seen that one.
Yeah, Danny Aiello. Her mom. I can't think of her mom. Off the top of my
Olympia Dukakis.
Thank you.
Yeah, run me through give me the 10-second plot synopsis on that one.
So she is a bookkeeper for like all these neighborhood like businesses, and she is dating Danny Aiello, who is like been a long time bachelor, and finally he's decided that he's going to ask her to marry him, and he does it really like bad. It's a really bad proposal, but then he proposes, but he's like, I got to go to Sicily because my mother's dying. So he leaves to go to Sicily, and in the meantime, he goes, can you go see my brother and get my brother, who I'm estranged from for the last 5 years, to come to the wedding? So Danny Aiello goes to Sicily to see the mother. She goes to see the brother. The brother's Nick Cage. She ends up falling in love with Nick Cage while Danny Aiello's in Sicily, and then they come back and hilarity ensues when everybody's together.
And refresh my memory, did Nick Cage indeed snap out of it? That's just a joke because it's like the most famous line of the movie. Snap out of it. And
Yeah. He's so good, man. He's a bit over the top. He's got this like very machismo thing going on where he's like super tough guy, but he's also, you can tell that he's like super, super vulnerable and very what do passionate. He's got this like real passionate side. He likes the opera. But like it's just one of those like transitional movies where like people are in one place and then they meet somebody and it unlocks something in them, and they're all so damn good in it, and it's like fast. Like when I watched it, I was like, it seemed like it went by in a heartbeat. And I love when a movie is well paced and you don't look at your watch at all and you're not like distracted by something, because you just can be in the moment. I think those are the best movies that you can watch, and it was one of those movies. I didn't have a moment in that movie where I felt like I wanted to go do something else. And the like final scene when they're like all together in the kitchen at her mom and dad's house is just so good. I mean, every person in it, every beat in it is just so good. Highly recommend. If you've never seen Moonstruck, go see Moonstruck.
I want to circle back and go check that out, especially now that you mentioned the final scene, and also I'm keen to see, like, to go back and revisit like a very early Nick Cage performance, given who Nick Cage has become. So I love that pick.
It fits. I'm telling you, you go back and watch it, and you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I understand. I see Nick Cage from today right there. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. All right. I love it. Let me get to my number one. So the rom-com as a form has certainly been around for, 100 years or more in the history of film. However, my number one pick, a lot of people have credited with really setting the template for what the modern rom-com can look like. And that is Annie Hall.
I knew this is where you were going to go. I figured.
Now, this is a Woody Allen movie. So I'll just say right off the bat, I'm not necessarily recommending that you run out and watch this movie. There are a lot of issues surrounding Woody Allen. I watched the documentary about the abuse that he allegedly committed against Mia Farrow's child, whose name escapes me. But I was pretty convinced by that documentary. He also married the daughter of the adopted daughter of Mia Farrow, who was way younger than him. And I think when they got married, I mean, she was barely in her 20s or something. And I don't know. There's just a lot of controversy surrounding him, and it's an argument that has come up many times over the past, last decade or two, about can we separate the art from the artist, and I think that this is a difficult subject for a lot of people. I watched the Finding Never, or the Leaving Neverland documentary or whatever about Michael Jackson and how he abused those two guys. And, I see people just grooving out to Michael Jackson songs all the time, day in, day out. And for me, like with that one, it's like, I don't get as psyched about Michael Jackson songs as I did at one time. So one line that one can draw is, I'm not going to support this artist while they're still alive. So I'm not watching new Woody Allen movies when they come out. I used to be a completist. I don't watch them anymore. Maybe after he's dead and he's not going to be making any money off of it, maybe I'll go back and check out some of that stuff. But apparently the Timothée Chalamet one is like really good. But I haven't seen it, and I'm not planning on seeing it. So I say all of that. Let's put all that aside. As a movie, Annie Hall is an absolutely incredible film. Arguably Woody Allen's like best film, maybe definitely his top three. and it's just nonstop laughs just from word go. It's hysterical. It encapsulates everything that was funny about that guy. It's got a great narration to it. Like, it's got a voiceover narration from the main character played by Woody Allen, Albie Singer, and the chemistry between him and Diane Keaton is just incredible. And there's just so many memorable lines in there that I can quote. And he really does a great send up of like Hollywood, because he was he's always been known as this like New York guy and how he hated Hollywood. And he really takes jabs at Hollywood in that movie that are really funny. So I got to put it as my number one. I do it while holding my nose, I guess, over all that. But if you can take it in a vacuum, it is absolutely like a stunning film, more so because of the time when it came out. So my number one, Annie Hall.
I wondered if this would make your list, because I know that you have a big connection to that movie. So my number one, I went with Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Nice. I just watched that like a month ago.
Oh, good. I'm glad you did. So this is one of those cases where I feel like the star of the movie is everybody but the star of the movie. And that's what makes it so good. I literally just watched it again with my wife last night, and in preparation for this. And every single person that the main character comes in contact with on this journey through this breakup that he has, and then, falling in love again, they're just, every one of them is so good. I mean, from all the people in the hotel to his stepbrother, played by Bill Hader, all the, you've got Paul Rudd, you've got Russell Brand as the Lothario that stole his girlfriend. Mila Kunis as the love interest. It's all so good. But the thing that's like, it really kind of like it punches you in the face right in the beginning with, this is a raunchy comedy, but it's a sneaky, like, heartfelt comedy where they hit you with this raunchy stuff, but they're like absolutely like threading through this super heartfelt story of a man that was complacent and stuck in a rut and had lost connection with his girlfriend to the point where she, had seeked, love somewhere else, and, tries to escape it all and ends up just kind of having to face the reality of his situation and go through it in a way that was very vulnerable and very heartfelt. And the beats in this movie are so damn good. And I could watch it over and over and again. I can't tell you how many times I've watched it in the last 20 years that it's been out. But, man, it's just so damn good.
Yeah, it's hysterically funny and crass, and yeah, it's fun. You describe it well as everybody else sort of being the main character, and yet at the same time, like there's no better guy to be in a rom-com than Jason Segel. I mean, just his face, just looking at him, he's perfect. So
yeah, he's
good.
Funny. He's funny. He's heartfelt. You believe him as the love interest. And I will say, Mila Kunis is just stunning in that movie. And it's crazy how, you just you can't take your eyes off of her, when she's on screen, which really helps you kind of be in the shoes of the main character. So just absolutely love it. Love it, love it, love it. So on that note, we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're going to take another ride in the Broom Wagon. Matt, what do you got this week?
All right, this week I am talking cycling, in much different type of cycling than the road cycling that this podcast is about. I am recommending that you check out the YouTube channel of Fabio Wibmer, who is an Austrian cyclist and YouTuber, who is a master of the brand of cycling called trials riding. You know what trials riding is? It's like guys who can like they have these bikes that are really tiny with no seat on them, and they can basically like put the bike anywhere they want. They can climb up a wall with the bike. They can bounce on on skinny little railings and get up on their back tire and walk with the bike. It's like the things they can do on bikes are absolutely incredible. The guy that like really put this style of riding on the map is a Scottish dude named Danny McCaskill. And Fabio Widmer is in the same mold. So your mind will be blown watching this guy's videos. They are so incredibly well done. They're super creative. Like there's one where he's in a city and he's just like, they're whimsical. It's like, he's this guy, he's like riding his bike along in the city and all these like obstacles like come out, and the way he gets around them are just incredible. Like, a car pulls out in front of him and he does a crazy flip and ends up on top of the car. And then like the car starts driving and he's balancing on top of the car, and then he jumps off. And as he's jumping off, like some person had just, purchased like a newspaper, and they were turning around and it happens to be right in front of him, and he grabs the newspaper. So he starts reading it as he's riding. I mean, it's incredible. He's also done a bunch of them where he's on these like downhill ski slopes, but he's riding his bike. And like, he does this one where he's like just going down this thing and the ski patrol is chasing him, and he keeps on going off these crazy ass enormous jumps. And then boom, he goes down the wrong path, and he's inside of the ski lodge, and it's like filled with people. And like, as he's riding along, like he like picks up a beer, like, and he's like, oh my God, and he's like drinking the beer, and he pops out the end of the ski lodge into like a 20-foot drop off. And he's like, I mean, they're incredible. So there's my recommendation. I can't give it justice. Go see Fabio Widmer on YouTube, and you will thank me later.
I will definitely do that. This week, I just wanted to shout out a show my wife and I watched. This is about to wrap up its, I believe, third season. Ghosts on CBS. It's actually an American knockoff of a British version of another show, but this one is it's just so heartfelt and funny. It's just the concept is the husband and wife buy a bed and breakfast in like upstate New York, and it's inhabited by ghosts that have died on the property over the last like 500 years. And the wife, something happens to the wife, and now she can see the ghosts, so she can communicate with the ghosts. But they're like this season they're opening a restaurant in their bed and breakfast, and it's just been so much fun. It's a family comedy. It's got all these wild characters, and it's just very unexpected, wholesome fun. My wife and I just absolutely just love watching it. It's one of our favorite shows of late. I can't recommend it enough. So, and that is all for this week. Join us next week for our recap of the men's side of the UAE Tour. Can't wait for that. We'll also break down the racing action from the Volta al Algarve and the Vuelta al Andalusia, and we'll finish out with a full review of Saturday Night Live's big 50th anniversary special episode. Until then, for my brother Matt, I'm Justin Harper. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll join us again soon on another ride beyond the slipstream. Ale!
Beyond the Slipstream is a production of Harperama. Find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please like and subscribe, smash that button, leave a 5-star review, and most importantly, tell all your friends about us. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time. Ale!